Hello everybody, my name is Rony Lahoud. I'm an interventional cardiologist at the University of Vermont. I'm joined today by Dr. Luke Seibolt, and we're here to talk about bicuspid valves. Dr. Seibolt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Luke Seibolt from South Georgia Medical Center in Valdosta, Georgia. Interventional cardiologist, and excited to be here to speak on bicuspid valves and TAVR.
That's great. So bicuspid valves remain a big challenge that we see. We have come a long way, I think, for our understanding for bicuspid valve in the past 10 years. But where do you see where the field is now, Luke, and what are the greatest challenges?
I think the biggest challenges are anatomy and calcium. I mean, we know these bicuspid valves are not our typical trileaflet valves. The calcium distribution can be different, whether it's commissural or leaflet. Really being able to evaluate and investigate that calcium, looking at the ellipticity of the annulus and especially how that favors a supraannular device, I think has been one of the really beneficial things in helping these patients, both symptomatically and hemodynamically.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like the bicuspid valves are probably the most complex TAVR procedures that we do for all these factors. They tend to be younger patients as well with bigger annuli.
Yes.
And the pattern of calcium can be very severe and also can just be very diverse depending on what a RAFI is. How do you feel like valve design and where we are right now, how has it evolved and maybe helped us in being able to tackle these cases?
Yeah, I think the technology has really helped us in just the evaluation of the valve itself. Your pre-planning, location of calcium, whether it's annular. Sometimes that calcium can be more nodular or really kind of linear. How that affects the interaction with the annulus as well as the leaflet itself. When you guys are evaluating these, are you looking at more location of calcium, degree of calcium, commissural leaflet, any other type of things you're looking at in evaluation of these valves?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're looking at first how much calcium is there out there? Yeah. What's the calcium score, the Agassiz score that we look at? And the second thing is, where's the calcium? Is it very eccentric? Is it only on one side? Or is it more symmetrically enlarged, symmetrically distributed? And then where's the RAFI? Is there a RAFI? How many? And is that RAFI calcified? I feel like that really matters a lot in how the valve is going to end up behaving.
Right.
What do you look at in CT planning when you look at the three mencius exactly? How do you approach it? But
I think one of the things that's really been great as far as that evaluation goes is looking at the ellipticity ratio of the annulus. We know these bicuspid valves are not circular. They're more elliptical or egg-like, which really poses a problem in a circular valve. And so I think with the Evolut platform and the decoupling that you can have between the annulus and the supraannular device, leaflet performance, I think that's a big key as far as hemodynamic success in these bicuspid patients. I think really the annulus and the technology that's going into ellipticity ratio and understanding of that, although in its infancy, is I think something that's going to really in the future help us.
Yeah, I agree. We have some data at 5 years where the Evolut platform is more circular than other platforms, and that may help with longevity, but we're going to have to see.
Absolutely.
How it does. The other tricky thing, and we mentioned a little bit, is these are usually younger patients.
Right.
And so a big question that we encounter is how do we compare to SAVR? Mm-hmm. And what would be the predicted longevity based on TAVR? That's always tricky.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned the 5-year data that came out recently that was favorable, especially in these bicuspid valves, but the challenge is the younger patients, as you mentioned, and I think being stewards of surgical versus, interventional management of aortic valve stenosis is something that a structural heart team and conversation really becomes important as far as managing that patient, and speaking on younger patients, not only the first valve, but the lifetime management of how to manage these patients really becomes important. I think that if a surgical option is available, sometimes these bicuspid patients have enlarged roots, or they might even be outside of what we can treat with a TAVR valve, but also knowing that I think we can safely offer these patients surgery or TAVR and give them the information to make that choice goes a long way in the management and treatment of their disease. So what are your thoughts on that as far as the younger patients?
I agree. And one other consideration is that we see more pacer risk with bicuspid versus tricuspid leaflets. And that's another consideration, especially for younger patients, that they're going to have potentially a high risk for a pacemaker. But the way I look at it is very similar, is that the things that really make me want to go to surgery is very young age, so less than 60, dilated aortas, more than 4.5 or 5, and just extreme calcification.
Right.
That's very eccentric. It makes me want to kind of more hone in on surgery. And a lot of the time it takes some convincing for patients to undergo the bigger operation, but it could be the better approach. Where do you see, I'm curious if you've had any experience with these AI planning for bicuspid. I think it probably has a fantastic niche for that. Yes, it is so complicated. And
yeah, I think so as well. I think the CT scans and 3-Mensio and some of those things are very helpful, right? But what does the future hold as far as visualization of the valve? How is it going to sit with the degree of calcium? Because we all know when you implant these valves, calcium has a lot to do with where that valve lands. You can do your best to try to land at 2 and 2 or 3 and 3. But if there's a big chunk of calcium or shelf of calcium, it's gonna kind of stick where it needs to be. And so can these AI generated models tell us how that valve's gonna perform, where it's gonna sit? Is that gonna be something we can accept as a team, or do we need to look at more of a surgical intervention if we feel like we can't get a valve in there without some sort of deformation, or is there something else that's really going to affect the hemodynamics of that valve and obviously the performance of the valve moving forward? But do you have any personal experience with that?
So not yet, but that's one thing I'm really excited about, is to not just look at what you have, but also look at the sort of the predicted final model and how the valve would look like once you deploy it. But I think you can only plan so much, even AI assisted or not AI assisted. I think it comes down potentially to the procedural technique and how do you approach a bicuspid valve differently than a tricuspid valve.
Right.
One thing that I almost always do for bicuspid valves is pre-dilating, and in some cases pre-dilating more aggressively. I don't know what you think about that. Is that a pattern of practice?
Yeah, no, definitely. We predilate pretty much all of our bicuspids, and especially the degree of calcium and the distribution of the calcium. We've all struggled getting across a bicuspid valve with stenosis that shouldn't seem as hard as it is to get across, whether that's wire or whether it's actually the device that's coming across. So, and there also seems to be some, quick kind of remodification of that calcium sometimes. We almost need to balloon it a couple times to make sure you get where you need to be in order to allow the full expansion of that valve. So I think predilation is key in these type of procedures, which obviously comes with another, rapid pacing. Anytime you're ballooning, you're worried about annular injury and things like that. But I think, understanding the calcium distribution in the annulus really helps with that safety. So yeah, we're absolutely predilating all of them, and I highly recommend that from a procedural standpoint, just to make sure that the valve does implant well, and then always evaluate for post dilation. But I would much rather predilate than post dilate in these instances.
Yeah.
Is your experience similar to that?
That's exactly my thought. And one other consideration is that a lot of these bicuspid valves tend to be larger annuli. And if you're implanting a larger, for example, Evolut platforms, you may be restricted with how aggressively you could post-dilate the valve, because you don't want to go much above the waist of the valve. So, yeah, I feel like it pays off a lot to pre-dilate, better pre than post aggressively. And then the other thing is, sometimes these bicuspid valves kind of correlate with very horizontal angles, and the worst anatomy in my mind is when you have a very large non-coronary cusp that's very horizontal, and then it's going to be very difficult to cross. Yes. And you kind of will tend to dig into the non-coronary cusp. Pre-dilating will help with crossing. Right. Sometimes it's not enough, and to really flex the Evolut enough to be able to cross. Yeah. I don't know if you've had experience with that.
Of the procedure. Yeah, just getting it to cross. No, and that's that non-coronary just kind of, it's almost like a sail that just really obstructs quite a bit. You mentioned earlier pacemaker rates. Is that something that you personally have experienced, increased pacemaker rates with these procedures, or do you counsel your patients differently, or maybe look for further monitoring before in anticipation for this procedure? Yeah, I feel like I have. My N is not going to be as large as what the study has showed, but the studies have showed a convincing signal at least that it may be a high risk. What have you seen? I feel like it's probably similar. Maybe a touch higher, like you mentioned, but it's not something that I ahead of time really really, just make sure patients are aware of that risk, but not something that I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this patient definitely is going to need a pacemaker if I do a bicuspid TAVR. I mean, that's just, it's kind of the nature of the beast, and you do your best to try to stay as shallow as possible, but make sure that you provide the structure and support for the valve to perform well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel a lot of the bicuspid procedure kind of revolves more on the shape of the valve itself, right, and how it's sort of like almost like a volcano shape for the aortic valve, as opposed to typical AS, which is going to be more focused on the annulus.
Yeah.
Do you do any sizing considerations that differently for bicuspid valves compared to tricuspids? Do you downsize because maybe you're looking at more the sort of the top of the volcano rather than the annulus?
Yeah,
or you know, the same?
I think that's, there's some information that looks at maybe sizing supraannular instead of annular in your bicuspid patients, but we stick to annulus. I mean, I think that's the safety is remaining at your annular size, and as we talked about, there's always seems to be quite a bit of calcium distribution at that annulus, and so sizing based off of a supraannular dimension can be tough because there really is no established area that we're supposed to measure off of, and also each patient is so different, it's hard to kind of establish some sort of consistency there. So we measure off the annulus, just like we would with the trileaflet valve, and pre-dial it like we talked about. I think that's the key to making sure that valve performs well and is deployed well. Yeah,
no, I agree. We're still learning a lot about this valve because this type of valve, they were excluded from all the initial trials, and so I think our data on them is a little bit delayed as a result of that. But now we've had, I think, a good amount of clinical practice.
Initially when I started my practice, I almost feared bicuspid patients. It just was the unknown, and as you get more and more comfortable with it, it's really, we used to schedule them separately. We'd put them, instead of doing several in that day, we would do one to focus on it. Now we seem to just add them in as any other trileaflet patient, and the expectation is that they'll do just as well, which I think speaks to not only the technology but the platform that these patients are doing just as well as the trileaflet patients.
Yeah, exactly. I think our valves have evolved, our techniques have evolved, and our understanding, most importantly, has evolved. Came a long way. But any final thoughts?
No, I really think it's a great conversation about what to think about, what to plan for, and really how to manage these patients to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the most challenging anatomy we still see, but I think instead of fear, now I kind of replace it with planning, anticipation, and I think you can overcome a lot of things that way.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for having this great conversation with me, and we're going to keep learning a lot as we go along. So absolutely. I think the next few years with maybe introduction of AI and better data about how the valves perform will give us a lot more answers.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Likewise.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Take care.